Chapter 20. Isolation and Reflection. The market square stretched before Elara like a minefield of potential contact, each familiar stall and corner carrying memories that made her chest tight with loss. Morning light filtered through Blackridge's crystal canopy overhead, casting geometric patterns across cobblestones worn smooth by countless footsteps. The air carried scents of fresh bread and honest commerce, mixed with the metallic tang of weapons being forged, sounds of daily life that had once provided comfort, now feeling like reminders of connections she'd been forced to sever. She traced the familiar paths with tactical precision that felt foreign after months of casual interaction, cataloging Vance's usual positions while calculating routes that would minimize intersection. The fountain where they'd synchronized their abilities now felt like exposed nerve, its crystalline waters reflecting morning light that seemed too bright against her withdrawal, sensitive eyes. Her boots whispered against stone as she navigated between merchant stalls, each step measured with careful precision. The herb vendor's position required 3 steps left, then direct path, avoiding the weapon stalls entirely. Mathematical navigation that eliminated chance encounters with warmth she could no longer afford to acknowledge. The scent of Timothy's fresh pastries drifted from his bakery stall, sweet aromas that once would have drawn her toward comfortable conversation about ingredients and enchantment applications. Now she forced herself to look away, focusing on predetermined destinations with mechanical efficiency that left no room for spontaneous interaction. Sound carried differently when filtered through isolation. Marcus's laughter at some shared joke seemed to echo from vast distances, while a cheerful haggling between customers and merchants felt like conversations heard through thick glass. Even familiar voices carried undertones of confusion, as people recognized her altered behavior without understanding its necessity. Her tower's crystalline chambers echoed with loneliness that cut deeper than any blade when she returned from abbreviated supply runs. The magical workstations sat unused, their crystalline surfaces gathering dust, while enchantment matrices pulsed with patient energy that no one remained to shape into useful purpose. Without Vance's presence to anchor her, the space felt vast and hollow despite familiar dimensions. Every surface reflected emptiness back at her, multiplying solitude until the air itself seemed thin and insufficient. The scent that had once lingered after his visits, honest steel and leather work mixed with something indefinably warm, had faded to memory that made breathing difficult. She pressed her palm against the observation window, feeling its cool surface pulse with magical resonance while watching Blackridge's morning routines unfold below. Players moved through their daily patterns with comfortable predictability while she remained isolated above, processing mathematical certainties that offered no genuine solutions.
"Distance protects him,"
she whispered to empty air that carried only the echo of her own voice.
"If Julian can't threaten him, can't use our connection as leverage."
But even as she spoke the logic aloud, her chest tightened with recognition of what she'd surrendered. Their synchronization during the protection ritual had revealed compatibility that felt dangerously close to destiny. Now that connection felt like phantom limb, every memory a weapon Julian could twist against them both if she allowed herself the luxury of maintaining it. The observation chamber's crystals hummed with defensive energy that seemed inadequate against threats that couldn't be repelled through magical barriers. Below, life continued with rhythms that felt increasingly foreign to someone who'd chosen isolation as protective strategy. When necessity forced her back to the market square for essential supplies, the herb vendor's awkward greeting carried undertones of confusion rather than hostility. His weathered features showed puzzlement as he processed her altered demeanor, trying to reconcile the warm professional relationship they'd built with this new distance.
Mistress Neary, the usual compounds for your specialized work.
His voice held careful courtesy, mixed with uncertainty, that spoke to community recognition of changed dynamics.
Standard inventory only.
Her voice maintained mystical authority, while her heart hammered with the effort of normal interaction that felt like performance art.
Nothing specialized or unusual.
The vendor nodded with professional acceptance, but his expression suggested recognition of systematic withdrawal from activities that had once defined her public identity. His hands moved among basic herbs and common components, avoiding the rare materials that had once sparked animated discussions about applications and preparation methods. Word would spread through Blackridge's merchant networks with the efficiency of all small community gossip. The sorceress and the Blood Templar no longer worked together. Association with either became safer through their separation, reducing the target profile that had made friendship dangerous. Good. That was the calculation. That was the mathematical necessity that served protection over personal satisfaction. But as she carried her minimal purchases back to the tower, each step felt like retreating further into isolation that served tactical purposes at the cost of everything that had made survival worthwhile. The weight of basic supplies felt inadequate compared to the complex components that had once filled her arms after collaborative planning sessions. The tower's spiral stairs stretched ahead like a ascending path towards solitude that felt increasingly permanent. Each step upward carried her further from community warmth that had become too dangerous to maintain. From his position near the blacksmith's forge, Vance watched Neary navigate the market square. The forge's heat pressed against his back, while Marcus worked heated steel into blade shapes, hammer blows creating rhythmic percussion that provided cover for observation that felt necessary, despite its violation of her clearly established boundaries. Steam rose from the quenching barrel beside him, carrying scents of hot metal and honest work that belonged to simpler problems than systematic psychological warfare. Her movements carried the rigid control of someone maintaining perfect performance despite obvious costs that showed in micro-expressions only careful observation could detect. The set of her shoulders spoke of barriers rebuilt with desperate efficiency, while her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was observing her carefully maintained facade. Tactical withdrawal. Professional isolation designed to protect what mattered most by eliminating vulnerabilities that enemies could exploit. He'd seen similar responses in Death Runner survivors who recognized that attachment created liability in scenarios where love became weapon rather than strength. Sometimes retreat became the only viable strategy for preserving what couldn't be allowed to fall into hostile hands. The blacksmith's hammer rang against heated steel with metallic percussion that provided rhythm for analysis, finding familiar patterns in her behavior. Professional function maintained while emotional connections severed with surgical precision. Competence preserved through systematic isolation from sources of tactical vulnerability. From his position beside the forge's orange glow, he could catalog the specific costs of her protective strategy. The careful way she avoided looking toward his usual positions, eyes that once sought his presence across crowded spaces now deliberately focused elsewhere. The slightly quickened pace when crossing areas where they'd previously collaborated on enchantment purchases and tactical planning. The rigid maintenance of professional composure spoke of effort requiring constant attention, energy expenditure that left less available for other necessary functions. Her breathing pattern had changed, becoming more controlled and less natural, while her posture suggested tension that never fully released.
Not your usual routine.
Marcus observed, following his gaze across the square while continuing his rhythmic work at the forge.
Different requirements now.
The economical response ended conversation while acknowledging changed circumstances that Marcus possessed enough tactical sense to recognize as boundaries not meant for crossing. Steam hissed from the quenching barrel as Marcus tested another blade's temper, the sound creating momentary cover for continued observation that felt both necessary and invasive. Through the market's casual chaos, Nairi's systematic avoidance of their previous interaction patterns became increasingly obvious to anyone with tactical training. She paused at the herb vendor's stall, her careful selection of standard supplies rather than the specialized components their previous collaborative work had required speaking to professional function, stripped to minimum necessities. The vendor's confused expressions suggested community recognition of their changed dynamics, word already beginning to spread through merchant networks with small-town efficiency. Smart tactical thinking. Reducing association while maintaining basic commercial relationships that didn't suggest continued partnership or shared vulnerability. When she returned to her tower with minimal purchases, their eyes met across the square for perhaps half a second. Contact that lasted just long enough for mutual recognition of tactical necessity before she looked away with deliberate finality that carried its own form of communication. But in that brief intersection, he'd read enough to understand the true cost of her protective strategy. The withdrawal was working, creating distance that eliminated Julian's ability to threaten him through their connection. But it was also destroying her piece by piece, isolating her from the only authentic relationship she'd built in months of careful professional performance. The mathematical certainty struck him with crystalline clarity as Marcus's hammer continued its rhythmic work. Her strategy would protect him while leaving her completely vulnerable to whatever systematic pressures Julian continued to apply through channels that operated beyond Covenant's boundaries. Unacceptable mathematics. But respecting her tactical decisions meant allowing the protective withdrawal while remaining ready to provide support if circumstances changed to permit intervention without creating additional vulnerabilities. Death Runner experience had taught hard lessons about survival, requiring acceptance of losses to prevent greater catastrophes. Sometimes the greatest protection came through refusing to be the weakness enemies could exploit through systematic pressure. As evening settled over Blackridge, with purple shadows that spoke of approaching winter, both carried awareness that isolation served tactical purposes while creating new forms of danger neither had fully anticipated. The distance protected him from Julian's reach, but it also eliminated their greatest strategic advantage, the synchronized capabilities that had made them formidable when working together rather than separately. The contract terms glowed on Elara's tablet like promises written in digital fire, harsh blue light cutting through her pod's dim interior, with electronic intensity that made her withdrawal, sensitive eyes, water. Premium exclusive performance agreement. The title alone suggested generosity that made her chest tight with recognition of the trap's elegant construction. Corporate language designed to mask systematic enslavement beneath veneer of legitimate employment opportunity. Her cramped pod felt smaller than ever as she studied the terms spread across the tablet's warm surface. The walls pressed inward with familiar claustrophobia while recycled air carried metallic sense of industrial life. Support systems working to maintain minimal habitability in spaces too small for natural comfort. Outside their porthole, the eternal glow of Immersion Hub 7's lighting systems created artificial dawn that never varied, electronic illumination that spoke of existence divorced from natural rhythms. Other pods stretched in geometric patterns through the housing complex, each containing lives reduced to mathematical equations of survival and systematic pressure. Triple her previous salary plus performance bonuses that would secure Micah's education for years to come. The financial mathematics glowed with seductive authority, numbers that promised security through surrender to terms that eliminated every protection she'd relied upon for psychological survival. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through clauses that stripped away another layer of professional boundary while maintaining corporate language that suggested legitimate employment rather than systematic enslavement wrapped in premium benefits. Unlimited scenario modifications at client discretion. Complete removal of content restrictions that had once provided minimal safety margins. Exclusive availability for all contracted hours with no alternative employment permitted. On-call status for emergency client requirements that could demand her presence at any moment. Each line eliminated autonomy while promising compensation that made refusal seem economically irrational. The tablet's surface grew warmer under her grip as haptic feedback responded to her emotional state with subtle vibrations that seemed to pulse in rhythm with her accelerated heartbeat.
24-hour availability.
She read aloud, her voice barely audible in the pod's cramped confines where every whisper seemed to echo off metallic walls.
No alternative gaming contracts permitted during agreement term.
The words carried weight of systematic elimination of every escape route she'd cultivated over months of careful professional diversification. Julian's terms would create complete dependency while removing all alternative income sources that might provide leverage for negotiation. Her financial projections spread across the tablet's surface like evidence of systematic defeat. Covenant's NPC's actor position barely covered their essential expenses, leaving no buffer for emergencies or opportunities that required financial flexibility. The AI management system strictly limited her hours to prevent burnout, creating income ceiling that made saving impossible while serving corporate liability protection. Without additional contracts, their situation would deteriorate with mathematical precision that offered no variance or mercy. Rent increases would force housing downgrades to smaller pods with fewer amenities. Nutritional quality would decline to minimum sustainable levels that preserved biological function while eliminating any pleasure from consumption. Most devastating, Micah's intellectual development would slow to standard user parameters, cutting off educational opportunities that might lift him from the systematic poverty that trapped most of Hub 7's residents. But Julian's contract offers everything. Triple income that would secure their housing indefinitely, performance bonuses that could fund premium education, security for years that would eliminate the constant mathematical anxiety of marginal survival. She traced the clauses with fingers that shook from withdrawal symptoms and growing recognition of systematic defeat. The careful construction of terms appeared generous while eliminating autonomy through corporate language that made violation seem like voluntary choice. No content restrictions meant enduring whatever scenarios Julian designed, with complete compliance. Unlimited modifications meant no safe words or emergency protocols that could halt experiences crossing into territory she couldn't psychologically survive. Complete availability meant no personal time, no recovery periods, no boundaries between performance and reality. The clause requiring intimate engagement metrics made her stomach turn with recognition of systematic measurement applied to emotional responses. Julian would monitor her psychological reactions. Chapter 21. Recognition and Resolve. Maps and documents spread across Vance's handmade table like battle plans drawn in ink and desperation. Each sheet weighted down with coffee mugs that had grown cold, while tactical analysis replaced sleep. His apartment had transformed overnight into a war room where connecting Julian's systematic campaign to patterns he'd survived once before became obsession that consumed rational thought. Morning light filtered through windows overlooking Subscriber District 3, illuminating dust motes that danced above intelligence documents with lazy precision. The scent of authentic wood filled the space, handcrafted furniture that spoke of time invested in creation rather than credits spent on manufactured convenience. Real books created research foundation unavailable through monitored digital channels, their weight reassuring against fingertips that had learned to read truth in physical materials rather than electronic displays. In the corner, his philodendron caught morning light, with leaves that had grown thick and green under careful attention. The plant provided living contrast to the cold mathematics of predatory psychology spread across every available surface, its presence reminding him that growth required patience and authentic nurturing rather than systematic pressure.
Escalating pressure.
Vance muttered, his pencil scratching across paper as he drew connections between Julian's methods and techniques used on Death Runner contestants whose desperation made them pliable. The graphite left dark lines that couldn't be electronically monitored, creating security through analog methods that AI systems couldn't penetrate. His handwriting filled margins with tactical observations that painted increasingly clear picture. First, isolation through targeting support networks with surgical precision. Second, economic strangulation through institutional pressure that appeared random while serving systematic purpose. Third, offering salvation through submission that appeared rational rather than coerced. Coffee had gone cold in ceramic mugs scattered across surfaces like abandoned outposts, bitter liquid that spoke of nights spent processing intelligence that transformed theoretical understanding into actionable knowledge. The aroma mixed with paper dust and pencil graphite, creating atmosphere of academic intensity focused on questions of survival rather than scholastic achievement. Professional breaking protocol. The recognition crystallized with horrible clarity as patterns emerged from seemingly disconnected data points. Julian wasn't randomly escalating scenarios or improvising psychological pressure. He was following established techniques refined through decades of institutional application, every pressure point calculated to force specific responses while maintaining plausible deniability. Vance's Death Runner experience provided framework for understanding that most survival training ignored. Institutional predators operating with systematic advantages relied on victims preserving themselves through rational self-interest. They collapsed when faced with opponents willing to risk everything, because preservation became secondary to authentic purpose. The Blood Templar class existed specifically to counter enemies who expected rational self-preservation. His analysis spread across multiple surfaces, intelligence documents connected with red string that created web of tactical understanding. Julian's corporate resources linked to Lord Malthus's supernatural capabilities through financial transactions that suggested systematic preparation rather than opportunistic exploitation. But stolen strength carried inherent weakness that purchased power couldn't eliminate. Lack of authentic experience with abilities acquired through shortcuts rather than earned through struggle. The necromancer's power came from operating behind false identity while wielding character progression that belonged to someone else. Outside his windows, The sounds of District 3's morning routine provided counterpoint to analysis that revealed how institutional predation crumbled when exposed to direct confrontation. Children's laughter echoed from the courtyard below, while delivery drones hummed past with electronic efficiency, normal life continuing, while he processed intelligence that could reshape everything. The pattern suggested tactical opportunities that conventional analysis would miss. Julian possessed superior resources, but operated through systems designed for rational actors who valued self-preservation above authentic purpose. Death Runner survivors understood that sometimes the only victory came through calculations that rational thinking rejected as impossible. As afternoon light shifted through his windows, casting geometric patterns across tactical documents, Vance began recognizing how systematic advantages became liabilities when enemies refused to operate within expected parameters. The breakthrough would come. He could feel it approaching like storm pressure building in clear skies, atmospheric tension that spoke of fundamental change gathering force beyond visible horizon. The soft tap against his window arrived with mechanical precision, spider-like appendages seeking entry through glass that separated authentic world from digital manipulation. Vance set down his pencil, graphite dust smudging his fingertips as he moved toward the sound that carried weight of anticipated intelligence. His boots whispered across hardwood floors that creaked with honest age, each step stirring dust motes that caught afternoon light in lazy spirals. The delivery drone's metallic body reflected sunlight as he opened the window, its cargo bay releasing electromagnetic signatures that made his skin tingle with static electricity. A memory drive wrapped in specialized shielding suggested information, requiring protection from AI monitoring systems that tracked digital transactions with systematic thoroughness. The device felt heavier than its size suggested, weight speaking to compressed intelligence that could reshape understanding of enemy capabilities. His fingers registered subtle warmth from the electromagnetic shielding, technology that operated beyond normal consumer access levels. Underground networks. Information that official channels couldn't carry without triggering systematic suppression, designed to protect shareholder interests from inconvenient exposure. His old contact from the black market dealt in secrets the AI systems weren't supposed to track, trading knowledge that bypassed institutional safeguards through anonymous channels, serving those with urgent need for dangerous truth. The drone's retreat created brief wind current that stirred papers across his tactical workspace, intelligence documents rustling with whispered conspiracy. The drive's electromagnetic shielding dissipated as security protocols recognized authorized access, revealing encrypted files that painted chilling picture of systematic predatory preparation extending far beyond normal gaming obsession. Each document added layers to understanding that transformed theoretical analysis into actionable intelligence. Corporate transaction records linked to psychological evaluations created comprehensive portrait of enemy who operated with resources that transcended individual capability while maintaining plausible deniability through institutional channels. Lord Malthus's true history unfolded with bureaucratic precision that made Vance's hands shake as he processed implications. The original player had died 6 months ago from reality withdrawal syndrome complications, his body discovered in an immersion pod that hadn't been opened for 3 weeks. Premium environment addiction had created dependency that proved fatal, when financial resources couldn't sustain access levels required for psychological stability. Classic RWS progression. Terminal phase that claimed hundreds of users annually, while corporations maintained legal immunity through carefully crafted terms of service. But the account representing 5 years of survival in Covenant's permadeath environment had been sold through black market channels for funds that could only originate from shareholder coffers. The transaction's timing aligned perfectly with Julian's discovery of Elara's Covenant position, creating mathematical precision and predatory planning that spoke to systematic rather than opportunistic targeting. Investment records revealed recent purchases that confirmed worst suspicions while adding new layers of horror to enemy capabilities. Illegal sensory enhancement modifications designed to blur boundaries between virtual and physical experience, until subjects couldn't distinguish reality from artificial stimulation. Premium AI tactical advisors that provided systematic analysis of psychological pressure techniques developed by corporate interrogation specialists. Consulting services that specialized in eliminating institutional obstacles to shareholder objectives through plausible bureaucratic manipulation. Legal firms retained specifically for harassment litigation designed to drain resources while maintaining appearance of legitimate business dispute. Unlimited resources directed towards single target with obsessive focus that transcended rational cost-benefit analysis. The apartment's authentic atmosphere provided grounding contrast to digital evidence of virtual stalking and systematic resource abuse. Real wood grain beneath his fingertips offered stability while processing intelligence that revealed predatory preparation, extending across multiple platforms and jurisdictions. Julian's schedule correlated exactly with Lord Malthus's most devastating raids, while psychological evaluations from his youth revealed escalating patterns of possessive behavior when denied desired objects. Corporate security footage showed him accessing premium VR facilities during exact timeframes when Malthus appeared in Covenant, creating mathematical certainty that eliminated reasonable doubt about identity. The pieces formed comprehensive picture that transformed their conflict from gameplay mechanics into something far more dangerous. The necromancer hunting near Ree wasn't just another player, but Julian himself, using stolen identity and unlimited resources to pursue obsession across virtual boundaries that were supposed to provide sanctuary from real-world predation. Understanding crystallized with tactical precision as afternoon shadows lengthened across intelligence documents. Julian's power operated through systematic advantages maintained by institutional protection and resource superiority. But those advantages became liabilities when exposed to direct confrontation that eliminated operational benefits. Time to change the mathematics entirely. Julian's complete dossier spread across Vance's surfaces like medical examination of systematic psychological pathology, each document revealing new layers of predatory preparation that went far beyond normal obsession into territory of institutional stalking. Investment records documented purchases that pushed far beyond legal boundaries into specialized technology designed for psychological warfare. Neural interface enhancers that increase sensory feedback to dangerous levels, creating artificial intensity that made normal reality feel inadequate by comparison. Haptic amplification systems that blurred distinctions between virtual sensation and physical experience until subjects couldn't distinguish stimulation from authentic touch. Premium AI advisors specialized in psychological manipulation techniques developed by corporate interrogators for extracting information from unwilling subjects. Software that analyzed voice patterns, facial microexpressions, and biometric responses to optimize pressure application while maintaining plausible deniability. Professional predation. Institutional resources applied to personal obsession with systematic precision that transcended individual capability. The psychological evaluations painted a picture of escalating possessive behavior that began in childhood and intensified through adolescence, when parental wealth eliminated consequences for increasingly problematic actions. Teachers' reports documented systematic targeting of desired objects, whether toys, academic recognition, or social relationships, with resource application that overwhelmed normal childhood resistance. Pattern recognition suggested someone whose understanding of relationships remained fundamentally transactional. Desired objects to be acquired through systematic application of superior resources, rather than mutual attraction or authentic connection.
He'd never faced genuine resistance. Never encountered someone willing to risk everything rather than submit to systematic pressure, designed to exhaust opposition through resource attrition.
Schedule analysis revealed correlations that confirmed systematic rather than coincidental targeting. Julian's premium VR sessions aligned precisely with Lord Malthus's most devastating raids against Blackridge's population, while his real-world activities followed patterns of institutional pressure designed to eliminate Elara's alternatives through plausible bureaucratic obstacles. The documentation created comprehensive understanding of enemy who operated with unlimited resources, but fundamental psychological limitations that had never been tested against authentic opposition. Julian expected rational actors who preserved themselves through cost-benefit analysis, systematic thinking that became inadequate when applied to opponents whose calculations included variables beyond personal survival. Vance's Blood Templar abilities, considered suicidal by most players who valued character preservation above tactical effectiveness, became perfect counter to Necromancer who expected victims to prioritize self-preservation at any cost. Sacrifice mechanics that rational thinking rejected as self-destructive offered tactical advantages that superior resources couldn't eliminate through systematic pressure. Different mathematics. Predator versus survivor, operating by fundamentally incompatible value systems. The apartment's authentic atmosphere provided grounding contrast to digital evidence of virtual stalking and resource abuse that painted a picture of systematic psychological warfare. Real plants breathed life into air, charged with dangerous knowledge, while handcrafted furniture offered stability during processing of predatory documentation that revealed enemy capabilities extending far beyond normal gaming obsession. Coffee had grown cold again in ceramic mugs scattered across tactical surfaces, bitter liquid that spoke of concentration so intense that physical needs became secondary to intelligence processing. The afternoon light had shifted, casting longer shadows across intelligence documents that transformed theoretical understanding into actionable tactical knowledge. Understanding crystallized with precision that made his hands steady, despite processing information that revealed systematic stalking, backed by institutional resources. Julian's campaign had achieved near-complete success through elimination of conventional alternatives, creating circumstances where submission appeared rational, rather than coerced. Economic strangulation, combined with emotional isolation, while maintaining plausible deniability through official channels that served shareholder interests above individual welfare. Systematic pressure applied through multiple vectors simultaneously, overwhelming targets' ability to respond to all threats while maintaining appearance of coincidental difficulties. But Deathrunner experience suggested responses that conventional analysis would dismiss as impossible. Institutional predation relied on victims operating within systems designed to serve those with superior resources, Direct confrontation that bypassed institutional advantages could eliminate operational benefits that made systematic predation effective against rational opposition. Time for different rules entirely. The dossier's final pages documented psychological evaluations suggesting increasing desperation for complete control, escalating obsession that eliminated rational risk assessment in favor of systematic acquisition, regardless of cost or consequence. Julian's advantages masked fundamental weakness that unlimited resources couldn't address. Complete inexperience with opponents who refused to be broken through resource application rather than direct confrontation. As evening settled over Subscriber District 3, casting long shadows through windows that framed tactical understanding with natural light that spoke of authentic reality beyond digital manipulation, Vance began recognizing how authentic connection could triumph over systematic predatory obsession backed by unlimited institutional resources. The plan crystallizing in his mind would require risking everything on calculations that rational thinking rejected as suicidal. Character deletion, real-world consequences, economic devastation that could destroy everything he'd built through years of careful survival. But Death Runner survivors understood that sometimes the only victory came through embracing mathematics that preserved what mattered most, while accepting personal costs that others couldn't comprehend or justify through conventional risk analysis. Julian had made one critical miscalculation that his systematic preparation couldn't address. He'd never faced someone trained to survive through sacrifice rather than preservation. Someone who understood that authentic purpose transcended individual welfare when systematic predation threatened what couldn't be replaced through resource acquisition. Outside his windows, the sounds of normal life continued with comfortable predictability. Children playing in courtyards that echoed with honest laughter. Adults returning from work that provided purpose beyond systematic accumulation. Community life that functioned through mutual support rather than predatory competition. Everything Julian's obsession threatened to destroy through systematic pressure designed to force submission from someone whose connection to authentic community had become more necessary than individual survival.
Time to teach him about the difference between predation and protection, between systematic acquisition and authentic sacrifice, between unlimited resources and willingness to risk everything for purposes that transcended individual preservation.
The intelligence documents rustled an evening breeze from his open window. Tactical knowledge that would reshape conflict from systematic pressure into direct confrontation, where resources mattered less than authentic purpose.